Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Monday Overreaction Show. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson. Do us a solid. Like this video. If we say something halfway clever or decent or funny or whatever, subscribe to the channel. We love growing in subscribers. Ring the bell for notifications and comment in the comments section because this might be one of the hottest Monday Overreaction shows that we've had in a while. And oh, by the way, Monday Overreaction Show brought to you by Rogue Apothecary, therogueshop.com. You can see the graphic on the screen. Check them out for all of your needs. And I believe today was a good day in the world of the Rogue Apothecary and for those of us who were down with the Rogue Apothecary products. So shout out to Richard, who was taking a little bit of a happy lap today on Orangebloods. We do love his participation in what we do. Anwar, usually, or there have been times so far this season, last week, a perfect example where we show up for a Monday Overreaction show and where we begin is tough to call because there's a lack of topics. Sometimes press conferences are just boring and we end up overreacting to things not even related to the Steve Sarkisian press conference, but not today. Today, we got news to react to from the starting quarterback position and what is going on there to Joshua Moore, to injuries. Shout out to DeMarvion Overshown, by the way. Like Anwar and I were like just legitimately as a fan of that guy. And not just because he's an Orangebloods athlete, wanted to know that he was going to be okay and not, suffering a serious injury, which looked like could have been possible on Saturday. A lot of stuff happening today. But there was some stuff baked inside of that as Steve Sarkisian unpacked his thoughts on why his team is 4-5 and kind of in the position that it's in. And I thought the Austin media today came with some good questions. So usually we're like, we're trying to just invent stuff to talk about. Maybe that's too harsh, but today there's so much. Where do you want to begin? What's the headline from today? I guess that's the biggest question.
I mean, Ketch, the couple of things rolled into one, Ketch. But one of my bigger takeaways from today's press conference was Sarkisian, and I've kind of outlined this in the war room on Thursday. It seems to be reaffirmed. Sarkisian is trying to assert himself and maybe in ways that he's trying to discipline this team or be the leader of this team or be more assertive of this team. He's trying to be more of, I don't know, lack of better terms in general, whatever it is, he's trying to switch from being like the nice and friendly, fuzzy, warm guy to being more of an authoritarian type of person. And what we're seeing, Coach, is that he's getting resistance. What my biggest takeaway is, as Steve Sarkisian tries to assert his authority, he is getting pushed back from guys that are within that locker room. And I'll give you kind of two examples of that. We have the Joshua Moore thing, as again, that we reported, we outlined about, essentially Steve Sarkisian decided to address with the team last week about the guys who were being late for the practices, being late for meetings. We've heard about being late on game days. So he decided, okay, I'm going to flex. I'm going to push back on that. And it didn't go as well as he thought it would go. There was some pushback. And then, of course, he gets into it with Joshua Moore. We see that. And then, of course, he announces, I text you on Monday morning that I heard that Moore was out. And then we started, he said something, Ketch, that also showed another bit of a red flag, Ketch, when he used the term, when he started saying they wanted to show the kids that they're demanding, but they're not demeaning. Essentially what he's saying is, we're telling guys certain things and they're taking it personal. We're telling them certain things about what they need to do and they're taking it somewhat personal. And he's trying to convey, I'm just trying to coach you hard. The last 2 weeks, Coach Ketch, we've heard Coach Sarkisian talk about how, even on Thursday, what did he catch? He said something in the press conference about being a player's coach. And he's like, even though I'm a player's coach, it doesn't mean I can't coach hard. It doesn't mean I can't, coach these guys up and be hard and this and that. And now, once again, we start hearing about the hard talk. So for me, that's what, even start with the biggest takeaway, and I'll throw it back into you. The biggest takeaway is, as Sarkisian tries to assert himself, guys aren't feeling it. And here's a challenge that he has, Ketch. And you as a parent can appreciate this. You can't wait until your kid is a teenager in order to start disciplining them. It has to start from day one. You have to wait from the young age. You have to let them know, okay, here's the rules, here's the regulations, and here are the expectations. You wait till a teenager, Ketch, it's too late. And so here we are, 9 games into the season, and really started last week, where he's like, okay, now I'm going to be the authoritative figure, and now I'm going to put my foot down. And people are like, and you weren't putting your foot down before, so why are you doing it now? That is the challenge and the obstacle he has to do as he tries to redirect his course.
Well, boy, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think one of the things, just where you ended, because I think you're right. I mean, it's funny. There are sometimes when you watch a Monday Overreaction show, we almost had to remember for a second, like, it's just a press conference and like coach speak and all of like, the stereotypical things you say to basically acknowledge, like, hey, it's a coach's press conference. So like, take it with a grain of salt, right? All of that being said, Sarkisian has gone out of his way to not, like, this isn't us interpreting or even reporting this. Sarkisian has been quite open in the last couple of weeks about, this is who I'm becoming as the coach. And they got to know that I'm an authority figure that, they have to listen to and respect. And like, there's a sudden new demand that feels new. And Sarkisian is telling us, I'm putting my foot down. I think this comes with, he had to hope that, because look, man, it's week 10. The biggest call out that I can have on Steve Sarkisian this year is that this stuff is happening in November instead of April. I mean, that he's having to put his foot down when the team is 4-4. I mean, that's right. So this all really kind of began like a week ago on the fallout of losing to Baylor. Mm-hmm. And it's continuing today. And like, the biggest thing that I would say is, God, it's late in the season. They're 4-5. Like, the season for most Texas fans is over. I mean, I wrote a column today on my 10 thoughts from the weekend where I'm like, look, they got to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, because this thing can't be the Titanic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What this has to be is, remember that famous ship that everybody wanted to get on and it hit that iceberg, but it made it to the port? You don't want to be the people who were on the boat that hit the iceberg that everybody talks about 100 years later, because almost everybody drowned in the water. Like, so it's imperative that Texas. So look, for Sarkisian, like, I will say this for him, he has to know that this isn't working. So he's changing his behavior to try to change results. At the end of the day, it feels like the locker room under Sarkisian, in order for this to work, is going to need a gigantic flush. That Joshua Moore is not a Lone Ranger, because if he were, and Joshua Moore was showing up late, and like, the players could have handled that. And I thought Sarkisian threw the players under the bus a little bit today, but he always does a little bit of like, he'll take ownage of certain things, and then later on he'll say something that kind of contradicts it, but then he'll take some ownership, but then he'll pass it on. He said, look, there are 4 kinds of relationships inside of our bubble. There's coach to player, player to coach, coach to coach, and player to player. And when identifying what he thought this program needed to get to the next step and away from kind of where they are right now, he said player to player. Now, I wonder if he asked his locker room today, if he took a straw poll and listed those 4 choices, I wonder if the players would agree with him that player to player is where the area of emphasis that needs improvement.
Mm-hmm.
That exists means that there's kind of a complete teardown. It's not what he would have wanted, and it's not what the expectations are. But today, this is a team that feels, in a way, needs to be completely torn down. And if Steve Sarkisian is going to work, it's going to be with a locker room full of his guys, and it's going to require patience. Because what we can't really identify is what the percentages are. But again, if he's saying the players need to get with the players and communicate together to get on board to buy this message so we can win as a team. He's got players, Joshua Moore, the most prevalent one at this point, who are saying, no, man, that's not it. And you know what? Oh, by the way, we've got it. Don't point the finger at us. We're not the ones on TMZ. Like there's contradictory things in terms of the coaching staff and the players. And I think he's lost a little bit of the ability to have higher ground because the players just this week are, seeing the headlines. I mean, you and I haven't talked about the monkey thing at all, right? But on some level, it does hang in the backdrop as coaches are trying to install discipline, trying to get guys to show up. But the players aren't exactly seeing that themselves. It's complicated. Like, this is a complicated, and they're 4-5. And if they're 7-2, this isn't really happening, but it's happening. And all I can take away from this press conference is this Texas team is not going to get right. It's done. They're 4-5. And they're in November and talking about showing up the time for meetings. That doesn't get fixed, at least not right away. So it really turns into what the hell has to happen going into 2022. It feels like there's going to have to be a line in the sand thing in the program where, like, look, are you a Sark guy or are you not? If you're not, maybe you need to leave. And what does it mean if due to a good leave? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this thing isn't as easy as all the malcontents or the bad players, because Joshua Moore is a starter.
Correct.
Joshua Moore plays so much that when last week happened, Anwar, he still played.
Correct.
He sat out a quarter. Everybody knew what happened. And then as soon as the second quarter started, it was like, yeah, man, go out there and play the rest of the game.
Correct. But the tricky part about this, Ketch, and this is where, and maybe this is where we kind of transition into this a little bit, but I mean, the tricky part about what he's saying at this point is he's suggesting a rebuild. That's exactly what he suggests. He's suggesting that there's going to have to be a rebuild that goes into this. And then there's a kind of like that car analogy that he used, and we'll talk about that in a second. The issue is, Ketch, that's not what he was signed up to do. He wasn't signed up to tear down the program in order to build it back up. What he was trying to do was fine-tune a good program and make it great. Yep. That's where Texas was. Texas was good. They were not great, but they were good. There were 4 straight winning seasons. There were 4 straight bowl wins, right? This team finishes 7-3 last season. You did 7-3 because Kansas got canceled because of COVID. If not for Kansas getting canceled for COVID, it's really an 8-win team. If you realistically had played the entire year without the COVID restrictions, Kansas is a victory. USF is a victory as well. It's more like a 9-win team than it really is a 7. And I'll give you LSU as a coin flip.
I think they lose to LSU, but it doesn't change the point.
Correct. So I give LSU as a coin flip. But even if you go to the L, it's still essentially you inherited what was on paper a 7-win team. In reality is more like a 9-win team, 9-win program, a program that only lost 3 games by a combined total of 13 points. His job was to come in here and take this good program, fine tune a couple little things, and then make it great. No one said you've got to tear down this whole thing, and then 3 years from now, let's see what happens.
Doesn't that feel like where we are?
It's starting to sound like it, but that's not where we were. And that's not what anyone talked about. And look, just a few weeks ago, he was talking about winning a championship. A few weeks ago, he was talking about meeting Oklahoma back in Arlington for a rematch for a Big 12 championship. Now, a couple of weeks later, we're talking about what's under the hood and how it's going to take some time. And in this car analogy and in fixing things, it's like, wait,
car analogy was bad, wasn't it? Like, as soon as he said it, I jumped into Slack and was like, oh, Orangebloods ain't going to be about this car now. For those that wouldn't have seen the video.
Go ahead, set it up, Ketch.
Sarkisian basically compared the Texas football program to a classic car that it was weird because I won't get too deep into it, but when I think of someone buying a classic car and they're talking about the rebuild, a lot of times the thing that needs to be fixed is the exterior. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times that's where the investment has to go. He said that, and words matter. He said that the classic car looked great from the outside, but then you look under the hood and it's got some parts that need to be fixed and areas of the car that need to be upgraded. And sometimes it takes a while to kind of get the car built up. And it was a fascinating metaphor because it immediately made some people think of Charlie's Bake the Cake thing, and I don't know if you're going to tell that story, boy, you got to say it early.
Yeah.
Because I think to the point that you were making a little bit ago, after Oklahoma, when he kind of publicly declared, we'll be back. Our goal, we want the rematch, baby. Essentially insinuating, we get this one a second time, we'll be ready.
You got it.
And to go from there to, and look, here's the thing. I do not know how to answer the question. So you and I, it feels like a rhetorical question to me at this point when we say, is this thing, does it need a full rebuild? Because Jesus, you and I spent 6 months, like back in the summer, we were having shows about whether or not the word rebuild should be in place for year one. And, I don't know that that's a conversation that you have at the end.
Yeah. That's a tough one. And look, what year did that happen? And we gave Herman some crap for that as well. Was it after maybe like the Sugar Bowl, the following year after the Sugar Bowl, where it was high expectations, and then all of a sudden it goes into this, other stuff.
Yeah.
And we're clearly, we're at the point in the season, and you and I have been doing this long enough. We get what's going to happen, right? It's going to be about the rebuild. Now we're getting late in the season, so injuries are going to start to happen. And now we're going to start hearing about how injuries, if such and such was healthy, if these guys were healthy. So we're going to hear about, how, significance of certain things down the stretch. There will be a lot of excuse making that happens. But ultimately, Ketch, I don't think anybody said to themselves heading into this year, yeah, you know what, look, just get to 7. And we'll start to build from there. Just get, if you can get to the 6 or 7, like that to be a positive step. That was the positive step for Herman to a certain degree, right? Hey, it was the first bowl win in how many years, right? You could say, all right, 2 non-bowl seasons, got a bowl season. All right, start to build. But no one was like, man, just if this team is in a position where if they can beat Kansas to get the 5, and then at least win 1 of the 2, then they're bowl eligible. No one's saying that. So the rebuild thing is a little tricky, Ketch. It's a hard thing to stomach.
Anwar, real quick, you know what? because I'm listening to us talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are gonna be people who will watch this video and they'll say, Ketch, Anwar, you guys just aren't putting a positive enough spin on this, and that you guys are being mean, and there's like an expectation from some that our roles in this are to do that thing that other people's fan bases media says that, oh, Ketch and Anwar just pumping up the Longhorns and they're just Longhorn fans. And like, there's this expectation from some that like, we're supposed to fight the good fight.
Yes.
No matter how bad it gets. And that there's supposed to be a company line that we roll out that keeps the positivity going. And so I can hear the beginning of this and I'm like, this isn't very positive. To that, I would just say, you had to have seen the press conference. I mean, we haven't even gotten to some of the weird stuff yet. There was at one point, Sarkisian was talking about social media and seemingly trying to tell the team that they should just not pay attention to it. Like, that's possible. I mean, it's just so this is just Anwar and I reacting honestly, organically to kind of where the program is. And, if it's too negative, I apologize. But the team is 4-5, and Anwar and I are talking about a rebuild now into the Kansas game. And people on Orangebloods, Anwar, are asking, well, what happens if Texas loses to Kansas? And I'm like, well, Kansas is a 30-point underdog. And they're like, yeah, but what happens if Texas loses to Kansas?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this isn't what we were supposed to be talking about. And it would be so disingenuously naive to pretend that the season's not 4-5, to pretend that this wasn't the exact opposite of what the program needed this season. Because we were talking about, can they get to 9 or 10? And people were like, God, I don't know if that's even reasonable to expect, but it's needed for recruiting purposes. Needed. It's like, well, they might go 8. When we said they might go 8-4, people were like, well, that's not good enough. That's problematic.
Oh, yeah.
Because we can't get Arch Manning if we're 8-4. And so the problem is you get to 4-5 and you get to these situations in the locker, and like there end up being a lot of questions that people have that they want to return back to us. It's kind of a shoulder shrug, right? Like, this gets fixed, right? He knows what he's doing at quarterback, right? I don't know. The only thing I can say about where we are 9 games into the Steve Sarkisian era is I don't know about a lot of things. And I'm supposed to be a bit of an expert on the program, right? Like, I can tell you about where the roster comes from and how it was comprised, and I can tell you all the history, but I don't have a good feel for where this thing, I don't even know how Saturday goes.
It's hard to even know about Saturday, Ketch, because again, yeah, it's easy, like clearly, right? On paper, you say certain things, but then look, everyone's quick to note and point out for at least a half, Kansas got in their ass against Oklahoma for at least a half.
Ari gave us the stat this past week where they were like 1-100 against the spread or something like that. No, here's Ari's stat for the day. Kansas has 1 win against the spread in the last 2 seasons, right? That's so bad.
Wow. So we could have retired if we were just betting against Kansas the past couple of years, right? That would have been our Bitcoin.
Yes. So it's screaming at us to say Texas 70, Kansas 21, and because Kansas is terrible. And yet we can read that stat out to a number of our constituency, and they'd go, yeah, but what's going to happen if they lose to Kansas? Like, the seed has been planted. And, it's interesting. Sarkisian showed up today talking about the injuries. Actually, that's not true. He was asked about the injuries. By the way, just real quick sidebar.
Okay.
Interesting to me, Anwar, that with the starting quarterback thing and the injuries and Joshua Moore, that was all that stuff wasn't part of his opening. Weird that such important things, somebody was complaining about the questions not being like enough tough questions. And I was like, well, the media needed to ask some housekeeping questions. Like, who is your starting quarterback? Because if you missed it, he doesn't know. He's going to tell us on Thursday. And if the quarterback situation was a relationship, it's complicated right now. Because there's maybe a hand injury and I don't know. It wasn't articulated in a way. I assume it's going to be Casey, but like, what do I know? We had to ask about the injuries. And oh, by the way, the good news is I think we thought DeMarvion Overshown was hurt, like out for the rest of the season. He's not. He was described as day-to-day, as was Bijan Robinson day-to-day, as was a couple of other players as well. Those were the two that stood out. Forgive me for forgetting. But I think the injury thing will be interesting to watch because day-to-day can take on an assortment of definitions. I mean, technically, Ben Simmons with the 76ers is day-to-day, technically. And
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like day-to-day can mean DeMarvion and Bijan Robinson are both back tomorrow at practice. Or it could be like he's doing one of those coaching things where he's just not being he's being very vague.
Correct.
And maybe Saturday rolls around and neither guy plays.
Yeah, he's not lying.
Correct.
He's just not telling you he'll be out this week. He won't play anything, And
because normally he'll say that. Normally he'll be like, we think we'll have him back. Or the plan is, and with his best player, he just said day to day. It was weirdly vague in the way that you just said. Like, if he was definitely going to play on Saturday, you could just say that. And he didn't say that with any of the injuries. Like, hey, we expect that they'll be there. I mean, so it'll be Thursday's press conference is going to be a banger.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Because he's going to name a starting quarterback. And like, there are injury updates apparently on everybody that we will have to follow up on, presumably. Hey, coach, is Bijan Robinson playing on Saturday? He's still day-to-day. I don't know. And I think we're at that part of the season where if he's day-to-day, but he misses Kansas, I think there's some blinking lights under how much more do any of these guys play if you start getting injured in the last couple of games of a 4-5 season. So, do you hang out and just get better and wait for the bowl game? If you're, we've talked about with DeMarvion, like, does it change if you're NFL eligible and you're going to the draft? How does that change things? So, there's everything's interesting, Anwar. And I don't feel like there are very few definitive answers.
Well, yeah. So, Texas could potentially enter this game, depending what happens, to your point, with potentially no Bijan, potentially no DeMarvion. Who's Alfred Collins was the otother person he listed,
yes.
Correct? Alfred Collins. So potentially without those three, and clearly no Joshua Moore. So, you're talking about being down Jordan Whittington, down Joshua Moore, and Xavier kind of being the guy that has to, lead the receivers with, whoever else has to fill in. So whether it's the Calvonte Dixons of the world, or maybe Avante Woodard gets some burn, but they end up going into potentially, and it's Monday. It's because it's Overreaction Monday is what we do. Down, some key players, key positions, which could make things interesting because, to your point, Ketch, I don't think you can look at anything in the season right now and say, I expect that to happen. I think you just got to say, we'll see. don't you, but if you go from definitive, like I'm going to stand on the table for something, man, it may not end well for you. So we'll see how those guys go, how it progresses.
God, again, there was so much to unpack from this entire press conference. The quarterback thing, just because it's kind of important, except now people are like, we don't, like, Texas fans aren't sold on either guy. So maybe it doesn't quite feel as important because now they're convinced that Sark will need to go through the portal to find a quarterback that, you know, would want to come to Texas at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sarkisian obviously is, you know, quite the quarterback guru, but that we're even having this conversation in November gives a huge indication of how south things have gone when it's like, who cares about either guy? And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that as two people who've been writing about the quarterback play, it's hard, like you just said about standing on the table. It has suddenly become very hard to find anybody who's standing on the table for either quarterback in terms of who do you believe in? Who do you think should start now? Right? I mean, I don't know that people are shrugging with whatever answer they give. And then when you talk about next year, again, file that under the category of, I have no idea.
I mean, you would think to yourself, okay, Hudson needs, you know, a little bit more time. You go with Casey, but the question, but when he puts out there that he feels like the thumb has kind of affected Casey, then that's got to be a judgment call. Then is 80% of Casey, 75% of Casey better than 100% of Hudson? You know, these are the kind of the math equations you've got to do.
No, you're right.
In your head and say what's the better option. And in games like this, Ketch, you don't want to give a team like a Kansas that life, that thing that makes them think that this could happen. And with this team's psyche, you definitely don't want this team playing some games with some sort of Kansas, because with this psyche, and we talk about momentum and how they continually lose momentum. If you're Kansas, what you say to yourself is, let's just find a way to keep it close. If we can keep it within 7 to 10 heading into halftime, it's like a boxing match. Just get past the 6th or 7th and wait for this heavyweight to kind of punch themselves out and then go to work. But you're may have to take some heat in the beginning. But if you can get them into deep waters, you have a chance. If you because Ketch, we've seen it 4 straight. We've seen it 4 straight. They get taken into deep waters. It gets sketch.
Kansas just got the brakes beat out of them by in-state rival Kansas State. And you know, they show up today at their field house thinking this could be our season. Because they're looking at Texas and like Texas is just as wobbly as we are. They've lost 4 in a row. We've lost 4 in a row. Like, we can do this. And
if you Kansas, you throw every play that you've got, everything that you're working on, some new stuff. You're working on triple reverses. You run. Hey, can you run? You know, any wing tee. I mean, options, like anything you could think of. You're Kansas. You have nothing to lose.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Hypothetical.
Okay.
Casey Thompson starts. Bijan Robinson doesn't play. No Joshua Moore. No Jordan Whittington. What happens in this game if that happens?
You got to hope that defense played the way they did the first half against last week against Iowa State. Like, that's what you got to hope for. You got to hope
Bijan can still go for $150 against Kansas, though, right?
You would think he should be able to go over 100. You would think Keelan should be able to get loose. I mean, you would think there should be some.
Kansas is legitimately terrible.
Oh, they are bad.
It would be so damning if And it'd be just like Texas fans to have a bad game against Kansas and then be like, well, Oklahoma did it too, as if ignoring the fact that Oklahoma's got a bunch of rings on their fingers that allow them to get out of jail on little things like, push to the wire against Kansas. Like, they don't care. They're still undefeated.
No, but you're right. What this offense looks like on Saturday, Ketch, we don't know. I mean, this should be a game.
Or do we?
I mean, we know for the most part who the studs are if you can get them the ball, right? You still got, arguably one of the best freshmen in all the Big 12 of Xavier. So we know he can get loose. Xavier got overthrown multiple times in that past week. And we don't say that because Xavier is an Orangebloods athlete. Say it because it's the truth. Okay, there's no NIL deal that says we got to pump up something or anything like that. We say it because the man, he almost had 300 yards receiving against OU. Like that ain't us doing it because we have to. And we know Xavier is legit. But we just got to see what everyone else does. But the Texas would be putting a lot on a freshman to say this. We need you more now than ever before.
I did this stat. I was curious in my 10 thoughts from the weekend, the Jordan Whittington factor.
Mm-hmm.
Through the play that he got hurt on, Texas quarterbacks combined pre-Jordan Whittington injury had a 162 quarterback efficiency rating, which that's what Casey was up until like a week ago. Like he's had the majority of the action so far this season, but that would rank third in the Big 12. If pre-Jordan Whittington was just a quarterback, the Texas quarterback position third best in the Big 12, which, you can live with that, quite frankly. You should win games if you're Texas, if you're getting that level of quarterback play. Since the Whittington injury, Texas quarterbacks have combined for a 129 rating.
Wow.
That is so bad that it ranks them 11th in the conference if they were a team. And not only does it rank 11th, but it ranks 11th by 10 points. Like the drop off from the moment Jordan Whittington, and because now we've had a pretty decent little sample size, 13 quarters. And now you take Joshua Moore out of the equation, and it's Xavier Worthy and some dudes that haven't done anything all season long. I mean, even on Saturday night, the wide receiver position caught 5 passes all night. Xavier had 2, Joshua Moore had 2, and Kelvontae Dixon had 1. So Kansas is probably so terrible that there'll be some fool's gold, or maybe Texas drops a 50 spot on Kansas because they're so bad. But God, it doesn't feel like Texas in its current state, with questions at quarterback, questions at receiver, questions at running back with the injury of Bijan Robinson, and obviously the questions that exist with the offensive line. I don't know how confident I feel that Texas will absolutely cover the 30.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to cover like that. We haven't seen that team that played against Texas Tech. It seems like a really long time ago.
It's not the same team. I mean, that team was pre-shattered 4-4. As crazy as it sounds, it still has Denzel Okafor on the team. You know what I mean? Like, this ended up, one of the things that's been lost in the conversation of the team is that we even said at the beginning of the year, this team doesn't have the depth to have some players picked off. Like they need to stay healthy on the offensive line. We talked about them needing to stay healthy at wide receiver. And you could probably lose Bijan Robinson and get by at running back better than losing one of your big 3 wide receivers, because it just didn't appear that there were any candidates to replace them. When we do talk about the talent that's in the team, they've now gone down a few pegs on the depth chart and kind of exposed the underbelly of the overall quality of depth that's lacking. But I don't know. I'm kind of just talking now. From the press conference, back to it. What else was there that we haven't talked about? We haven't really talked about the Joshua Moore thing.
Sure.
So let's just take a moment. Joshua Moore, we've talked about it peripherally, but on Wednesday, we reported that Joshua Moore had an altercation with Steve Sarkisian, and that it remained in doubt what would happen with Joshua Moore. Steve Sarkisian held a press conference the next day on Zoom where he downplayed the incident and kind of said, shame on us for reporting it. You specifically took a lot of heat over the matter, including a number of reporters in the market, either saying that it wasn't a big deal at all or misrepresenting how Sarkisian framed his remarks about the comment. Then on Saturday, Joshua Moore doesn't play in the first quarter, at which point, if we hadn't reported what we did on Wednesday and Moore wasn't playing, people would be wondering why wasn't Moore playing and why we didn't have the information that one of the starting wide receivers on the team wasn't going to be playing. That's news. So interesting how all that happens. And then today, Sarkisian could not have been prepared for this. And kudos to Chip Brown for asking the question. And we had got wind of this before the press conference, but we were still kind of vetting it behind the scenes. For Chip to ask him specifically about Joshua Moore's status on the team was a good question. And it completely fished out the answer that he is in the portal and he's no longer in the program. And anything specifically you want to say about just that scenario? Because it should never be personal. It shouldn't be Anwar, how do you feel about report? You know what I mean? We try to not be part of the story, but we, in the name of just taking a crap on Orangebloods, some people chose that moment to question ethos and journalistic integrity, and that just a few days later, this thing has unfolded the way that it's unfolded. It feels it would be it'd be unfair if I didn't at least ask you for your thoughts on the whole thing.
Well, I mean, Ketch, I feel like since I've been in the market, I feel pretty good about what my percentage is as far as accuracy is concerned. I think most people, the only thing they can really ever point to is the swoops thing. And, that one gets lost in the telling of that story, right? Because, people talk about it and it's not even close. And everyone always ignores the fact that every website reported the exact same thing about a week later. And then, when the things change, it was and then we reported how the change occurred later on. But, it's how people remember it. And sometimes it's the old journalism motto, don't let facts get in the way of good stories. So it is what it is. In a situation like this, Ketch, what happens, and so people kind of have some understanding, is when I report something and there's news, there's conversations that are had behind the scenes between Ketch and I, where we feel okay, let's talk about it. How do you feel about it? And then, okay, if you feel strongly about it, then go with it. I think, Ketch, you give me a lot of liberties. I think you trust me as a reporter. So, which I do appreciate. And what we understood at the time of reporting the thing of Joshua Moore was that there was things that are going on behind the scenes that now you're starting to hear about today, right? Or at least you heard about it in the War Room. You got to be a subscriber to Orangebloods. But if you heard about it, you saw some of it outlined in War Room. You're seeing more of it today. You're kind of getting that now is more of an idea, idea of what the situation is. And of course, there was this huge pile on at this point. There was a you're stirring the pot. Oh, this is just normally happens. And one of the things we kept saying was this was not normal. This wasn't the typical coach / player altercation that we hear about but never report. There's a reason why we did it in this specific instance, because we knew much more of what was going on, and we knew this was just a reflection of all the other things that we know is going on, and that's why we felt like it was important. There was a starting receiver on a team had his locker cleaned out. It was not a part of the team, and so as people try to downplay it, you know, the thing that's sometimes I view I view reporting like this, Ketch. I view it mostly like golf. I don't necessarily worry about who else is out there on the board. I just play my game. I don't necessarily get caught up in, is this person right, or that person right, or this person right, or anything like that with like other websites. I just try to play my game and just kind of stay there. I very rarely get on other people's websites. I feel like if it's significant enough, someone posted on Orangebloods, but I don't want to be chasing what other people are doing. And as that happened, okay, oh, you're stirring the pot. Okay, oh, you're a troublemaker. Okay, you're getting that, but then you know, as other websites try to pile on and make it seem like you don't know what you're doing, you know, and kind of grandstand a little bit, you know, it's a dog pile at that point. But then what we see, Ketch, is everything that we said to see to be true. People say, oh, you should do a victory lap or anything. Like, I'm not into like that. Like, I'm petty for sure. And there's some people, Ketch knows me well enough. We have been in this together for 8 years, you know, 10 and a couple. And he knows me well enough to know Anwar can be freaking petty. I can be petty. So there's some things, like I had some receipts and I sure kept them, and, you know, and I sure put them on the table today. But, you know, at the end of the day, I, as a reporter, Ketch, don't ever want to be a part of the story. I don't want to be a part of the narrative. You and I have a tremendous voice here, a tremendous platform. So I understand that we get more attention than others do, and then I understand what that comes with. But it's never a goal. Our goal is never to stir, you know, and let me just say this, Ketch. Our goal is never to stir a pot. Okay, there's no win for us when people try to say, you guys try to stir the pot, you guys are clickbait, you guys are doing all that. There's no win. You guys love it when this team loses. No, we don't. We actually hate it. We hate it. It's not good. It's not good for business. It's not good for our life. It's not good for our message board. Everything about it is not good. Having to report on Joshua Moore and these kind of altercations as you have with the coach, that's not great. We don't love that. There's nothing that Ketch and I are like, man, if we put some stuff out there today, watch how it makes it rain. That doesn't work that way. So, you know, as relates to the Joshua Moore, you know, all I can say is next time, just have a little faith, just give some degree of just letting something, you know, marinate a little bit. I know it's so easy to pile on. I know the dog pile. I get it. It's what we do in today's society, but you know, for the fans who watch it, sometimes just have faith. And I just, you know, for other reporters, sometimes it's just best to just play your game. You can put your information out, but don't try to put other people down. Like it's unnecessary. It's uncalled for. And that's kind of that's my whole situation as far as your question about the reporting aspect.
All right, I have one more thing from the press conference. By the way, that is all completely fair. There's nothing else that I need to add to it. Although there's part of me that wants to. It's like, do I get snarky and just throw a line? No, I'm gonna let it go. There's one more thing from today that I want to get to before we start to like wrap things up. Dennis Della Pena asked Sarkisian about what do you see that gives you reasons for optimism?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought when he asked it, at first I thought, okay, well, you're putting one on a platter for him, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This is the recruiting pitch. Here's what we hear him say to Arch Manning. And by the time Sarkisian was done answering the question, there was a part of me that wondered, did Della Pena just hit him with a low-key passive-aggressive way to hang himself? Because maybe once we get past all the news that broke and all of like the things, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things, but when he started talking about player development, he mentioned 3 names. Brendan Schooler, Alfred Collins, and Tope Amade. And I could hear brains exploding on Orangebloods because, well, first of all, Alfred Collins falls into the category of one of these guys who early on in the season was seemingly in the doghouse, probably for things that are still happening with the rest of the team today, right? So like consistency and discipline and like doing all of the things right every day. But like nobody ever questioned his talent. But then with Brendan Schooler and Tope Amade, you're talking about two guys that I don't know that Texas fans would get excited about, like the supposed development. I'm not saying that they haven't gotten better. I'm just saying that when I heard the question asked, I was expecting some wow and some pizzazz, and he could have mentioned Xavier Worthy. Like he could have said anything that he wanted to say. He didn't exactly, with his answer, I think, paint a picture of look how good of a job of development we're doing. Because I think two of the three guys that he mentioned are guys that Texas fans would hope by God they can find a way to upgrade from a year from now.
Yeah, it was an interesting response to that, who we thought were, standouts, because when we think of standouts, but I think he was talking development more so than anything else. And so
he was.
So he felt like those guys have developed, a little bit more. And so whatever he thought their starting point is to where they are now, okay. I mean, if he feels like they're developing behind the scenes and they're playing to, whatever the thing is, I mean, I guess, okay, fine. I mean, it is what it is.
He knows better than we do. Right? I mean,
yes, he's there every day. He from the day he got here to when he gets answered this question on a Monday in November. Yes, he definitely knows better than we do.
I'm just saying, if I was a fan, I probably would have wanted to hear some other names, even if it wasn't true, right? Like the quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Just, say something that makes me. I thought he was giving the platform for a recruiting pitch.
Yeah.
And instead I heard that and thought, oh, don't say that in front of Arch Manning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's the latter part of that. What do you say? One thing I'm encouraged by is a lot of players trying to do things necessary, in the team. I'm just kind of looking through the entire quote, when players start to hold other players accountable, which kind of we talked about, a little bit for what's acceptable or not. And they're just all part of that whole thing where he thinks players are recognizing who's doing what. Okay. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to go back through and wanted to see if there was anything on that I missed. I mean, it's cool. I mean, the hard part, Ketch, is 3 games left for more than 3/4 through the season. I mean, there's, I will say once again, this point in the season, you are who you are. The team is who they are. And you would have thought there's some different guys, but maybe he just feels like that's weird. I don't know. Okay, it's a weird one. I don't know.
Can I ask you a question before we wrap up? I'm going to ask you a version of the question that Della Pena asked Sarkisian.
Okay.
What's the most optimistic thing in your mind about the state of the program right now?
Well, there's some individuals, obviously, that goes without saying. You still got a decent good 2022 recruiting class that's coming in.
That's probably the answer, right?
Yeah, it's got to be help is on the way, right? At 2022. How many offensive linemen do they have though? Ketch, is it 2 that are committed?
2.
Yeah, I don't remember he said he had 5 that he can call right now. Just touch base with them just to be safe and see if 1 or 2 of them hit at some point. That's probably recruiting probably for 2022. Now 2023, they already got a guy, right? In 2023, Ketch. The defensive back is the guy. So I forget his name. I apologize.
I've got a question to plant in your head for a future press conference down the road. Like, it's not super timely, but since he brought up that they need 5 offensive linemen, period. I mean, he put that number out, right? We need 5. We want to sign 5. And he pretty much said, we're holding out for difference makers. And that's what you've got to do. Is it appropriate to ask before those kids make decisions what the plan would be if they don't? Because I'm curious. Like, he's told us they need 5. Does that mean they go get 3 high school kids and it's like maybe they know exactly who they are and it'll be like The Godfather, right? Bang, 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 it's over with. Maybe. Or at that point, in his mind, is that portal time? Right. So if we can't get our big targets, we're not going to dip down and go get a 2-star or a 3-star. I'm just curious from a planning standpoint. Is that a question you ask afterwards, or is that one that's fair to ask before all the big fish make their decision? Because he brought it up, and I'm just curious about, given how important he said getting 5 offensive linemen in this class are. How does he? I'm just curious about what the backup plan is.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get a real answer to that until signing day.
Yeah,
because I think anything asked before that, he's going to say we still have an opportunity. Those guys are still out there, so that's not how we're thinking about it. And I don't know if he can relay that message. Like, so just in case, hey Cam, if you don't come, like, I already got some ideas about going to go to the portal and get some guys. Like, Cam be like, oh, for real? That's how you feel? All right, well, we're good on that. So,
he told us what plan A is.
Yes, plan A is to get the studs.
All I'm saying is, I'm just curious what plan B is. For myself and Anwar Richardson, hey, like the video. Waka, waka, waka. We'll talk to you tomorrow. You guys be good to each other. Later.